Hello everyone, that's Mox here. I'm just going to say before the video that there is going to be a little bit of scenes that it's just like the screen looks pitch black. No worry, it's no problems with your computer or with the video. It's transitional scenes I made where it's only vocal only and then with black screen. Those are just for transition like I said. So enjoy the video. Once upon a time, the railroad was the heart of activity and life in the community. Nowadays, it is only known as nostalgia and heritage of those who have rarely ever seen it, or as a way of getting to work in large cities and places like so. March 3rd is National Train Day in 2016, a day to celebrate the past and show the future of railroading. We will take a look at this great past and what has ended it and what has rebirthed it to the great systems we know today. Nowadays, not much is left of these great railroads except for 6 large companies, 2 of which being Canadian. Most railroads are very small short lines, except for the 4 big competitors of the US. Once there was hundreds of railroads spanning across this nation. Then they merged to try to save each other. Hundreds of fallen flags have opened up. This is the story of what it was like when they were still around and what killed them. We begin our tale here, just after World War I, as this has given enough time for the railroads to get bigger and more powerful locomotives. At this time, there wasn't much competition for the railroads. Automobiles were just starting to spring up. This meant that trains were still the ultimate way of getting around in the 1920s. Like with locomotives such as this Pacific here, getting ready to haul a night train from the small town in the United States. Most engines were smaller than this Pacific on many lines, though new engines were coming far stronger and powerful, such as Mikados, Hudsons, Malays, and Northerns. This is just a small scene of once a great era. This was also a time of many advertisements. Railroads like the Lackawanna used ideas to make them sound better. Their idea was Phoebe Snow, promoting that they were clean. Other railroads like the New York Central and PRR did slogans that showed that they were faster and more efficient at what they were doing. The time now is 1937. With all railroads running steam engines, its air pollution is becoming worse and worse. It was needed in New York City for a reduction of this air pollution. With railroads like the PRR and their K4s, they needed a replacement. A replacement came in the form of Raymond Loewy's GG1 electrics, as you could see this one pulling up now, alongside its K4 brethren. These engines were not only clean, being electrics, as proven what they were in 1885 in Scranton, PA. They were also very fast and very efficient. The PRR's GG1s have never been fully put to the test. Even today, almost 80 years into their existence, they've never been found out what their true strength really was and what they were capable of. World War II came through. Every locomotive that was able to was pulled into service in order to pull trains. This meant by the end of the war, they were too worn out to continue running. But then Electromotor Division, or EMD, came along, and they produced the answer the railroads were looking for. That answer was the diesel electric, as can be seen here by this Union Pacific E8 being pulled up along onto our tracks. These EMD locomotives were not only powerful, but they were new and they had replaceable parts, something steam locomotives never had, as everything was made with cast. These, on the other hand, could be produced off the production line, one by one. But nowadays, even these early diesels are considered rare and valuable. By now, things aren't looking so great for the railroads. It is the 1960s. The Penn Central Corporation has already been created by the PRR, New York Central, and by force of the government, the New Haven Railroad, in order to continue doing work. This, of course, bankrupted the company as soon as it was started, if it wasn't already losing traffic to the highways, thanks to overregulation and taxation. There was also the Erie-Lackawanna Railroad merger. This was when the Delaware-Lackawanna Western Railroad merged with its longtime rival Erie in order to survive, as the DL&W was pretty much destroyed in 1955 by Hurricane Diane, when it wiped out a good deal of their main line and took away the businesses with it. In 1972, when the Erie-Lackawanna was getting money back, it was then hit by Hurricane Angie's, which wiped out a lot of the Erie system up in New York. That crippled the Erie-Lackawanna and made trucking very popular at this time, because people abandoned trains for the highways and for the aeroplanes. 1976 rolled along. By this time, the railroads were in such bad condition. To survive, they had to salvage everything they could, even when they couldn't buy fuel for their locomotives. Luckily, some railroads came out better than others, such as out in the Chicago areas, an electric railroad, which its name escapes me at the moment, is currently doing fine and well due to the oil crises of the 70s giving it a lot of traffic. By 1976, it was so bad, it was said that pretty much all the refurbishment money in the world couldn't save the railroads if it was let any worse. So one thing was created. The Consolidated Rail Corporation, known as Conrail, started up at this time. It took the bankrupt Penn Central, Erie-Lackawanna, Reading, and Ann Arbor railroads and stuck them all together. At first, things were very mishmash, but then Big Blue came through, and thanks to it being the first super railroad and having power in Congress, they officially saved railroading to make it as good as it is these days. Now let's move on to the 1980s. We now move on to the early 1980s. At this time, what was left of passenger service in the U.S. was Amtrak and small state-run rail lines like NJ Transit or New Jersey Transit. Even though they were running vintage equipment on most of their lines, such as NJ Transit having stuff from Pennsylvania, Lackawanna, and New Haven, they were still very reliable and useful, even at this time. Things that they used were New Haven RDC cars, Erie-Lackawanna Blue Jays, or U-34Cs as they're known, and the famous PRR GG1 electrics, as all of them were still good shape. The NJ Transit was the last to use the GG1 electrics in 1983 when they retired them. As you can see, GG1 number 4877, known as Big Red, pulls a small commuter train out to New York, same as it did even back in the 1930s. We now skip ahead again to the early 2000s. Because of politicians finding ways to screw things up, The CEO of Conrail knew it was going to be no good if Conrail stayed alive. He put up an act then to finally end Conrail. That act split it up between two railroads, the Norfolk Southern and the CSX. It also allowed for creations of places such as the Reading and Northern Railroad and Steamtown National Historic Site. Not much is left for this era, but we now enter into the 2000s where things get done. In modern times, the only place to really catch steam locomotives is to go to tourist railroads or to museums, as can be seen here as a Steamtown National Historic Site excursion gets ready, being pulled by the famed Canadian Pacific 2317, being photographed by a national park photographer to be put up on posters. This is the same in many places over the U.S. Some railroads have even brought back steam. The Strasburg Railroad in Strasburg, PA, uses steam not only for somewhat passenger, but also in freight revenue sometimes. We also see the Reading and Northern having their own steam locomotive, the 425 and the C&J 113 joining along. And the UP has brought in excursions with their large locomotives, and many railroads else have. So now you can see these fire-breathing giants roll the rails once again. But sadly, with great strides comes great setbacks, as for most of the U.S., things are still changing. Just in recent years, Amtrak has tried to turn National Train Day into a day called, I forget what it was called, but it was with pretty much Amtrak, all about Amtrak basically. This also being said, the last of the great railroads from the north, Delaware and Hudson, being the first railroad, was also the last to fall, falling in 2015 officially, hauling its last air products item to the Reading and Northern Railroad, and then ceased to exist the following minutes. But great strides has come back because of this. Now plans are in session to bring back the line between Scranton and New York City, and now new railroads such as the Allentown and Auburn, the Crookendale, these names, they're northern names, but railroads such as these have now started up and becoming revenue. And even the Reading and Northern, as I mentioned before, although not now a major railroad, it's now becoming one, thanks to dedication and skill of the employees and the people who bring steam to the 21st century. They keep railroad history alive, and for that, that's a brief history from the 1920s to the modern day of railroading. Thank you for watching.